information, link in the description box. So anyway, that's why I have the nails on. Otherwise, I don't wear nails for this channel, and that is simply because it's one less thing to do. You know what I mean? So that's it. Now let's get to the case. Tonight we are traveling to Indiana. Shout out to all my friends in Indiana. This is the 2021 case of Brandon Hole. This is known as the deadliest mass murder in the state of Indiana. So let's go ahead and get into it. Brandon Hole was born on August 20th, 2001 in Indianapolis, Indiana. Now, much of the information, not all of it, but a lot of it, comes from his mother, Sheila Hole, who gave a very thorough interview. So, a lot of what I'm saying is from her. Okay, so, according to her, he grew up enjoying fishing and roller coasters. He was a typical happy little boy up until the age of 3. You see, Sheila and Brendan's father used to fight all the time, like violent fights. And little Brandon would witness these fights. His father had severe mental illness. Now, one day, when Sheila had had all that she could take, she told Brandon's father that she was leaving him and she was taking Brandon. And he said what he has said to her many, many times. He said, "If you leave me, then I will end myself." But this time she did not listen, and she left with Brandon. And unfortunately, Brandon's father made good on his threat, and he hung himself in the backyard. Now, Brandon did not witness this, neither did Sheila, but he was very well aware of what had happened, and he began to change immediately and show lots of troublesome symptoms. One thing was he had developed lots of little routines for himself that he had to follow, and if anything got in the way of his routines, he would go into an uncontrollable rage. Even by 4 years old, he was depressed, and he often threatened that he would do the same thing to himself that his father had done. And as the years passed, his symptoms got worse and worse. His mother reported very odd behavior, like, for example, he had to wear 3 pairs of shorts or pants at all times. Not 1, not 2, but 3. He had to wear 3. And he would rock back and forth while he watched TV. And if any of his routines were disrupted, he would have to start over. And it would take him hours to get ready sometimes, which made him late for school all the time. Now, at the age of 10, he was diagnosed with disruptive behavior disorder, anxiety disorder, OCD, and he was prescribed nurse wrote, quote, "Mom has had to call police when he has been abusive to her," end quote. Now, in the year 2013, when he was 11, he was arrested for the first time. He had been outside in the yard playing with Sheila's boyfriend at that time, and they were having a good time. But the boyfriend playfully sprayed him with the garden hose, and he went into a rage. He raced into the house. He went into the bathroom and he locked the door, and he just started tearing the room up like they could hear what he was doing. And Sheila was afraid that he would hurt himself. That was always her fear. So she was begging him to open the door. And finally, she got the door open. He came flying right out the door. He punched her in the face. He kicked her. And he raced into the kitchen, and he got 2 kitchen knives. And he managed to corner her in the kitchen, and he stabbed her. He stabbed his mother. Luckily, it wasn't too deep. She was not horribly injured, but nonetheless, he had attacked her, punched her, kicked her, and stabbed her, his mother. Because why? Because he was that out of control. But the police had been called, I'm not sure by who. Maybe by the boyfriend. And the police showed up, and they arrested him. He was charged with battery, criminal confinement, and intimidation. And he was held in a juvenile facility for only a few hours. That's it. He went before a judge a few weeks later, and he was put on probation. Now, I was thinking, I don't like to give my opinions at this point, but I'm not going to remember to give my opinion at the end on this. A situation like this, where an 11-year-old has done what he just did, would you arrest them like that, or would you take them to the psych ward? My first thought was he would go to the psych ward, not go to jail, but I don't know. So anyway, like I said, he got probation, and he got some counseling too, but nothing changed, and his mother was now pretty afraid. She saw what he could do, even though he was much younger than her. He still had a lot of strength when he was angry. And plus, when she would go to sleep, how would she know what he was going to do? So anyway, he wound up getting suspended from school several times for fighting. And by 2014, when he was, I guess, 13, she had to start homeschooling him. During this time period, a social worker would come to their house 2 days a week to check in on him. And in 2015, when he was 14, he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And he ultimately gave up on the homeschooling, and I guess there was nothing his mother could do. So he never got past a 6th grade level of education, and he had nothing to do with his time. He wasn't doing schoolwork. He didn't have friends. He didn't have a job because, well, he was too young. So what was he supposed to do with himself? Well, he turned to the internet, and he became obsessed with serial killers and mass murders. Now, that year he had a big assessment done by the Riley Children's Foundation of Indiana, and he told them about his obsession with serial killers, but he also said that he felt badly for the victims. questions were was she leading him? You know, that's my thought right now, that, you know, she was asking him, oh, okay, so what do you feel about the victims and their families? You know, like, I believe that he knew what to say. I don't think that he cared about the victims or their families, but he knew what the right thing to say was. So she believed he had empathy. And he had stopped taking his medications by that point as well. So he's completely unmedicated. Over the next several years, Sheila tried to help Brandon to manage his anger at home the best that she could. He had very little socialization. You know, he did not have friends, and he did not really go out very much. He was just sitting there going on the internet or going out to his therapy sessions. On March 2nd of 2020, he was 18, and he loved to go to the Army surplus store because he was very interested in the military. In fact, he wanted to join the military. He even ate MREs in preparation for the military, you know, meals ready to eat. So he asked his mother to go with him that day to the Army surplus store so that he could purchase a firearm. And although she did not want him to have one because she knew it wasn't safe, she went with him because he was going to get it with or without her. He was 18. And she felt if she went, at least she would know exactly what was going on, you know, what he was getting and when. So he purchased a rifle, but luckily the store was all out of ammunition. And after they went home that night and he had gone to bed, Sheila contacted the police department, and she told them that he had just gotten a gun. And they knew who he was, I think. But she said that he often spoke of ending himself via police officer. And she was very worried that that was what he was going to be doing with this weapon. They agreed with her that it was a big risk, so some police officers came over immediately, as well as members of the Mobile Crisis Assistance Team, and they handcuffed Brandon, and they confiscated his gun. Now, while he was being put in handcuffs, he became very anxious, and he told them not to look at his computer and please just turn it off. So when the officer went over to shut off his computer, of course, he took a look, and what he observed, he identified as white supremacist websites on the computer. You see, Brandon Hole had 2 Facebook accounts dedicated to My Little Pony. Now, you've probably heard of the term brony, but if you have not heard of it, it's a combination of bro and pony for My Little Pony. So it is a subculture of generally males who are interested in the cartoon and toys of My Little Pony. Now, some of the members of this subculture are supposedly sexually attracted to the characters, while others allegedly display far-right tendencies. And then I suppose there are probably some who are, you know, just fans. I don't know that much. If you know, let me know. But anyway, it's a troublesome group from what I understand. So when they realized that he was a part of it, they were concerned. And he was taken to Eskenazi Hospital was he at Eskenazi and I get a call telling me he was walking home or I was picking him up, end quote. According to the records there, Brandon had seen a doctor who denied that he had any plan of ending it via police, and that Brandon said that he, quote, feels fine, end quote. So once again, they're asking him how he feels or what he's thinking of doing, and he tells them the right thing. That's my opinion. Now, in the state of Indiana, they have a red flag law, and Sheila believed that if the concerns about Brandon's mental instability were serious enough that the police took his gun, then this red flag law should have applied to him. But here's the thing. Under the red flag law, Brandon could have been prevented from making firearm purchases for at least 6 months if a hearing had been scheduled with a judge 14 days after the seizure of his weapon. But there was no such hearing in this case. And there should have been if they took away his weapon. They're supposed to have a hearing to determine whether or not he will get it back. And if they give it back, then it's a way of saying, okay, he's fine, here you go, you get it back. And if he doesn't get it back, then he is not allowed to purchase another weapon for a period of time. At least 6 months, they said. So, the Marion County prosecutors decided not to schedule such a hearing, believing that authorities had already achieved the law's objective. Since Brandon did not wish to have the weapon returned to him, when they took it, he said he had only purchased it for hunting. He wasn't going to do anything bad, and he did not even want it back. So they figured, given that statement, they don't need to have a hearing regarding whether or not they would return the weapon. And in addition, the prosecutor named Ryan Mears said that if they had proceeded with the hearing and they had lost, then they would have been forced to return the shotgun to him. After this whole incident, the FBI was contacted to take a look at what police described as, quote, very disturbing neo-Nazi content. So Sheila, his mother, met with a member of the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force in April of 2020. She said, quote, he turned to me and said, your son hits every red flag for a mass shooter. And that's when I said, well, you need to go and arrest him and take his computer, end quote. On April 15th, an Indiana state trooper and an FBI agent came to the house to talk to Brandon. Brandon felt very traumatized by the meeting that he had with these people. The agent asked him about his purchase of the gun. He asked him if he gets on 4chan's website and if he liked My Little Pony. Brandon was angry that the agent questioned his obsession with My Little Pony, saying that that is how neo-Nazis talk to each other, through the My Little Pony websites. And Brandon told the agent that he hadn't talked to anyone concerning neo-Nazi rhetoric, and the FBI could look on his computer. They asked him what he wanted to do with his life, and he said that he either wanted to join the military or the FBI. And they told him, well, you're not going to be able to do either of those things given your history. This investigation was later closed due to insufficient evidence of any criminal violation or a racially motivated extremist ideology held by Brandon Holt. At age 19, Brandon got a job, believe it or not, a good job working for FedEx. He was making good money, and it was enough for him to was very hopeful that he had finally turned his life around and things were going to be good from that point forward. But sadly, he only worked there for a few months. It was from August to October of 2020. And the reason that he lost the job was not because of anything bad that he did at work. It was just because he stopped showing up. That was it. Stopped showing up and he gets fired. So he had to move out of his new place and move back in with his mother. And things returned to being as awful as they had been. Maybe worse. So during the next several months, he received $3,000 stimulus money from the government. And what do you think he purchased? He bought 2 automatic rifles because his name was not on any list. He was free to go out and buy weapons just like anyone else. So, according to Sheila, quote, "It was over $1,000. It was 1,400 or something of that nature. And when a detective asked me, where did he get the money to fund that kind of weaponry? The government. You guys gave my son over $3,000 in stimulus money. Don't give it to me, where I'm helping pay his light bill and whatnot. You didn't give it to me. You gave it to a suicidal mental teenager." End quote. So Sheila said he started to become even more unstable in 2021. He even called the FBI agent that he had previously spoken to complain about how upset he was over their past conversation. He confronted the agent regarding the neo-Nazi accusations, stating that they were false, and he said that he feared that they had a file on him that was going to interfere with his success in the future. So Sheila took him for emergency counseling at that point. And according to a letter from the Midtown West Side Clinic, an affiliate of Eskenazi Health, it was understaffed that day, Friday, March 19th of 2021. And after they had waited for 4.5 hours, Brandon could not be seen. 3 days later, he did meet with a licensed clinical social worker, and according to the records from that session, quote, "He doesn't have empathy. He doesn't care about the lives of others," end quote. And he was deemed a moderate suicide risk. 9 days later, on March 31st, he met with a different social worker, and he talked about the same things as he had in the previous meeting. This social worker wrote about his experience with the FBI and how he had tried to hang himself after the experience. She noted that he could be a risk to himself and others and that he lacks empathy. Now, from my understanding, if someone is a risk to themselves and others, that is a reason for them to be hospitalized. But no, she wrote it down and off he went. Now, on April 14th of 2021, he had another counseling session. According to Sheila, quote, "I had to go in with him because I wanted to tell them how traumatizing it was that the FBI and IMPD, the way he was treated by them, it was very traumatizing to him, and I needed to tell them that. I needed him to tell them that he hit me so that they would understand that this was at a level where maybe there are more red flags for you," end quote. So after the meeting, came home from work. They had a nice dinner together, and he even asked her to give him a haircut, and she did, and they were getting along very nicely. Then they both went to sleep, or so she thought. But at 11 p.m., he left the house, and he drove to the FedEx facility where he used to work, on the southwest side of Indianapolis. Now, there were at least 100 people in the facility at the time, and many of them were changing shifts, so they were in and out, and the door, which was normally locked, and you normally had to use your ID card to get in, it was held open, because people were coming and going, so he got right into the building, no problem. And he started shooting. He was randomly shooting both inside and outside of the facility, and a witness said they heard him screaming something while he was shooting, but they could not figure out what he was saying. Now, most of the people inside the building did not have access to their phones to call 911, because FedEx had a rule at that time that when you were at work you couldn't have your phone on you. But nonetheless, he was done with the shooting in 4 minutes, so I don't think that would have really mattered. When all was said and done, he had shot and killed 4 people inside the building, 4 people outside the building, and 7 other people were injured as well, including 4 by gunfire. He had then turned the gun on himself. Now, he had 2 AR-15 rifles, and he was wearing a My Little Pony shirt. He had My Little Pony stickers on the rifles. Less than an hour before the shooting took place, he had posted on his Facebook account, quote, "I hope that I can be with Applejack in the afterlife." Applejack is the name of one of the ponies. "My life has no meaning without her. If there's no afterlife and she isn't real, then my life never mattered anyway," end quote. The victims ranged in age from 19 to 74, and these are the names of the people who lost their lives. Carly Smith, 19, Samaria Blackwell, 19, Matthew Alexander, 32, John Weishart, 74, Amarit Sekon, 48, Jasvinder Kaur, 50, Jaswinder Singh, 68, and Amarjeet Johal, 66. Sheila would later say of the shooting, quote, "I won't grieve his death, I can't. I grieve the victims' deaths because it's not anything I ever thought would happen," end quote. She went on to say, "I just want people to know that if there's something wrong, and I wish I could tell them who to call because I don't know, maybe they could call me and I would try to help them because now I have nothing. Want to see me bust down some doors and get you some help? Bet I do. Maybe I didn't do it for my son, but I will for you, and I am so sorry for them. I am very, very, very sorry. There are no words." During a news conference in July of 2021, the FBI stated that they found no racially motivated violent extremism ideology identified during the investigation. The FBI defined what Brandon did legislative session had ended. And that is the case. What are your thoughts? I will share some of mine. First of all, rest in peace to all of the victims of this horrific, deadly crime. My heart goes out to each and every one of them and their families and friends. Now, what can we say of this case? I mean, looking back, it seems very, very obvious that he was just a ticking time bomb. Something was going to happen. It was just a question of when. Now, for the most part, Sheila was just thinking that he was going to do something to himself. But it did not turn out that way, unfortunately. And it seems like everybody knew that he was very, very likely to do something terrible. You know, that he had all these warning signs. It's hard to understand how these mistakes were made, you know, especially allowing him to purchase more weapons. Like, that is the biggest piece of insanity here. I just don't get it. He needed to be on a list of do not sell weapons to this person. Call it whatever you want, call it red flag law or something else, but there needs to be something in place so that a person like him cannot be sold a weapon. I mean, you went in and you took it away from him. Yeah, he said, you don't have to give it back to me, that's all it takes. Saying, you don't have to give it back to me, and then they think, okay, there's no problems here. He doesn't even want it back, so we don't need to put him on any kind of a list, you know, it's fine. He's not gonna try to buy another weapon because he said, you don't have to give it back to me. So, you know, it's just ironic that he used the stimulus money, you know, the government stimulus money. But the truth is, if Sheila did not have him listed as a dependent on her taxes, then he would get the money. She wouldn't get the money for him, you know, to spend for him. He would get the money. I mean, I have to say, Sheila tried her hardest. I don't blame her at all. She did what she could do. What more could she have done? You know, unless she had a lot of extra money, which it doesn't sound like it. You know, if she had a lot of resources, then she could have put him into some private hospital program, right? A private residential program. And that probably would have been great. But if she just was left to, you know, deal with the public resources and have to keep reaching out to social workers and police for help, you know, if they're not going to give her the help that she needs, what is she supposed to do? She kept calling them, she kept telling them that he was a danger, and they kept giving him back to her. It was just so ridiculous, you know, how he stabbed his mother and then he was back home again in a couple of hours. Or things were bad enough that they took away his gun and they brought him to a mental health facility, and then he was sent out of there. They're just like, okay, go, you can either walk home or have someone pick you up. Like, that's it, after 2 hours. Anyway, you get it, I get it. Let's just hope that things have changed. I think Brandon was one of those people who never really had a chance, you know. He probably inherited mental illness from his father. And then one of the earliest things